I'm joined now by the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden. Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister. We'll be talking a little later to the man who wants to be the angel of death for your kind of conservatism, Nigel Farage. Now, you've told the Sunday Times this morning that you're gravely concerned about Russian influence boosting the reform campaign. Are you saying that Putin is backing Farage?
Well, this is something that I've warned about for some time. Indeed, I was at a Defending Democracy Summit in Korea earlier in the year, meeting with leaders from around the world to discuss exactly this. There is a threat in all elections, and indeed we see it in this election, from hostile state actors seeking to influence the outcome of the election campaign. Russia is a prime example of this, and this is a classic example from the Russian playbook. Now, what I would say is that this is relatively typical low-level stuff, the use of bots, but we have stood up the election cell in the Cabinet Office. We did that at the very beginning of the campaign, and it was designed to look into exactly this sort of thing. And I think that your viewers, it should just be a salutary reminder for all of us, when you engage on social media, are these people that you think are posting stuff, are they real or are they bots generated by hostile state actors? It's something we all need to be aware of.
I'll ask him directly later on, but do you think that Mr Farage is aware of this, approves of it, cares about it?
I have absolutely no idea. Those are all questions for Nigel Farage to answer. By the way, I'm not remotely suggesting there's some sort of direct collusion between the two of them. What I am warning about is the threat of
we know he admires
Russian state interference in our elections. And when it comes to Nigel Farage's comments in relation to Ukraine, I'm deeply concerned by the fact that he chose to use the old narrative of somehow that the EU or someone else was responsible for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Only Russia was responsible for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the terrible effects that is having on the people of Ukraine right now as bombs rain down on them, and there's a fight between democracy and freedom going on there, and we should be absolutely clear whose side we're on.
According to the polls, most of the people who say they intend to vote for reform voted for your party, the Conservatives, in 2019. What can you say to those people to bring them back?
Well, it's very simple, that at the election on Thursday, there are only two people that can walk through the door of 10 Downing Street, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. Now, Rishi Sunak has a plan to cut people's taxes, to control migration, to protect our green belt. The alternative is Keir Starmer, who has a plan that will involve putting up people's taxes, whether you're a pensioner, paying tax on your basic state pension, whether you're a first-time buyer, paying tax on your first home, and plans that will involve less control of migration and building on our green belt, as you saw on the front page of the Sunday Times today.
I've got the campaign thing, but let's just think about the politics of this. Last time round, Nigel Farage backed off his challenge to the Tories in 2019. He decided not to put up candidates where he thought the Tories were going to win. He's probably watching now. Try and persuade him to spare the Conservative Party from a humiliating defeat.
Well, I'm not in the business of persuading any of my political opponents. I'm in the business of persuading...
He can help you.
Trevor, I'm in the business of persuading people to vote for the Conservative Party. And why I would say people should vote for the Conservative Party is we've started to turn the economy around. Inflation was 11%, now it's 2%. As we get inflation under control, we're cutting people's taxes, we're controlling migration. All of those things will be put at risk by the only other person who can walk through the door of 10 Downing Street, Keir Starmer. If you want to stop Keir Starmer walking through the doors of 10 Downing Street, the only way you can stop it is to vote for your Conservative candidate. I do genuinely understand people's frustrations, but in the end, you've got to, in this last week, it's the choice, Labour or Conservative. To stop Labour getting in, you have to vote Conservative.
Well, that's not quite right, is it? Because a lot of the people who you do want to vote Conservative, who voted Conservative before, are now with Mr Farage. Now, OK, let me ask you this. You've heard some of the language, some of the things that have been said by reform activists and volunteers, which some Mr Farage has now disowned. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm deeply saddened by some of this language, and particularly the language that you alluded to at the top of the programme. I grew up in the 1980s, and I thought the use of the P word was long behind us. And actually, I've been quite heartened by the fact that political parties from across the spectrum have come together to condemn the hurt not just felt by the Prime Minister, but felt by the Prime Minister's family as well. And I think it's right that we should all come together and call out the use of that deplorable language.
But you could, I guess, find some way of reaching out to reform. I mean, the truth of the matter is the centre-right has been split. That is what's going to give Labour, if the polls are to be believed, a big majority. Is it too late now to unite the Conservative family?
Well, I think that the way that you unite the Conservative family is for voters. And I understand, genuinely, I have many conversations with voters whose the pen is sort of proverbially hovering over which box to put the cross in. If you're worried, and so many voters I speak to are genuinely worried about what Labour will do to their taxes, whether they're a pensioner or a first-time buyer. They're worried about what Labour will do to the Green Belt. The only way, if you share our Conservative values of cutting taxes, of controlling migration, it's only by voting Conservative that you can stop Labour getting in. And what I would say is just think in 6 months' time how you're going to feel. I have a strong feeling the shine is going to come off Labour pretty quickly. Buyer's remorse will set in, and the bigger the Labour majority, the bigger the buyer's remorse. Everyone still has it in their hands to stop that by making sure they vote Conservative to stop that happening.
When you say to stop that, do you mean that you still think that you can win, or do you mean preventing what Grant Shapps called a supermajority? What is your aim now?
My aim is to make sure that we win an overall majority. Of course it is. That's the best possible outcome for this country is for the Conservatives to have an overall majority. What I'm saying to people there is I do understand their frustrations and that they need to just don't think about the anger just now, right at this moment. Think also about how this country is going to be in 6 months, a year's time, and think carefully about the consequences of voting Labour and how you can stop that happening.
738 weekends you've been in charge. The truth of the matter here is that actually you are not just fighting Labour, but you're fighting your own past. Liz Truss, Boris Johnson. This is a catastrophe that's been, for you, that's been built over many years. And I just wonder, let me ask you a question about that. Why haven't you deployed Boris Johnson, who proved to be your most effective weapon against Farage in 2019? Where is he?
Well, Boris, I think, has already been sending videos and supporting candidates. But I would take, but Trevor, I would take issue.
He's effective, been effective out on the street.
I'm not going to accept the premise of your question. Actually, if you look at the record since 2010, when we came to office, unemployment was a huge problem. Since then, 4 million jobs have been created, record low unemployment. We had low standards of maths and literacy. Now we have the highest reading standards in the Western world. So we have got a record of which we can be proud. Now, of course, after 14 years in office, you don't get everything right, and I understand people's frustrations. But ultimately, this isn't about the past. This is about the future of the country in the next 5 years. And I would urge people to think about how they will feel in 6 months' time, in a year's time, if Labour are in power, if they're putting up people's taxes, imposing those regulations. It remains in people's hands to stop it.
I know you want to turn your fire on Labour, but actually a large part of this is about the Conservative Party and conservatism. As I said, this is your 738th weekend in charge. How does it feel to be essentially on the eve of destruction for your party? Because that's what every signal tells us.
Well, I would say in an election campaign, you can have commentators, and you're an interviewer and probably a commentator, Trevor, and you can have participants. I'm a participant, and my job, whether it's on the doorstep or in this television studio, speaking to you and to your viewers at home, is to make the case for the Conservative Party and to warn, mark my words, dogs bark, cats meow, Labour put up taxes. Don't take that risk. It's in your hands. We have a clear plan to control migration, to start to reduce taxes. The game is on. The fight is on. Now is the time for people to make up their minds about the future of our country.
Liz Truss essentially made the party of sound money into a party of market chaos, and Boris Johnson made the party of law and order and party of lawbreakers. it's really striking that in this interview, you just seem to refuse to accept that you're carrying that burden.
Well,
The D-Day, the gambling, the rain also. I mean, actually, it's been a mess.
Well, Trevor, I thought I'd said this at the beginning. I accept people's frustrations. And of course, having been in
I'm not
power...
talking about people's frustrations, I'm talking about your failures.
Having been in power for 14 years, of course, we haven't got everything right. I totally accept that, and apologies have been made for various things that you've mentioned there. But fundamentally, now this is a choice about where we go as a country for the future. I'm very proud of many of the things we've achieved in government, not least unemployment, education standards and so on, but now this is about what happens over the next 5 years. And in these last few days, I think that the choice between our two parties is becoming much, much clearer. And in my experience, people are starting to turn their mind to that choice.
Some people say that, let's say, if you were unfortunate enough to lose this election, that what the Tories need is a period of stability under a steady, moderate, experienced leader. David Cameron sat in that chair a few weeks back, said he's going back to his shepherd's hut. Kemi Badenoch, some people think, could start a fight in an empty room. You're very popular amongst those who say they want calm and tranquility. Would you be up for it?
Well, all these stories, I guarantee you, Trevor, are total and utter nonsense. There's only one thing that I'm focused on, and that is making sure we have an overall majority for the Conservative Party to fight for every single vote.
OK. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.